3:03 a.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a security guard calls 911. The 911 operator asked if the caller needs police, fire, or medical assistance. The caller replied by saying he needs the assistance of the police. The caller said his lead is out there right now. He said he just found a body out in the parking lot. When patrol arrived, they found a woman's dead body wrapped in a blanket. The team hopes to identify the victim through her fingerprint. While the investigation was being carried out on the crime scene, Detective Reggie discovered a camera in a house close to the crime scene that could give them a lead. He and the other detective decided to visit the house to see if they could get footage. After collecting the footage, they headed back to homicide for investigation. While watching the video footage, they discovered that 14 minutes before the security guard called 911, a white car parked where the victim was dumped. Just outside Mobile in Alabama, policemen got a report of a man shot outside his house. A caller who called 911 said the victim was shot in the yard. He said it was life-threatening. Before policemen arrived at the scene, family members rushed the victim to the hospital. The victim was taken to Health University Hospital. 37 years old Joe Dickerson, a car enthusiast who wished to take over his father's garage, is the victim. He was survived by 9 children. Joe was shot once in the abdomen. When mobile detectives arrived at the scene, a witness came forward. The witness agreed to talk when he gets to homicide. The team left the scene of the crime for further investigation at homicide. As soon as they got to homicide, the witness was taken into the interrogation room for questioning. Detective Barnes entered the investigation room to question the witness. Detective Barnes told the witness to tell him what happened. The witness said he has only agreed to talk because the victim is his cousin and he has a lot of children like him. The witness said he wasn't in the yard when the shooting happened. He said he was at the corner store coming down the street. He said he popped up into the house moments after the shooting. He said he saw the shooter running with a gun in his hand coming down the street. Detective Barnes asked the victim if he knows the shooter. The witness said he knows him very well. He said his name is Dillion Fox. He said the shooter is popularly called Little D, and he just got out of prison. The witness said he can confirm that Dillion Fox is the shooter because he saw a gun in his hand. He said he saw him clearly because it was daylight. Detective Barnes asked the witness the type of gun he saw in the hand of the shooter. He said it wasn't a Clint Eastwood gun. Detective Barnes asked if there was anyone in the house at the time of the shooting, but the witness said he does not know. The witness said the victim had told him that he and Dillion Fox got into an argument. He gave detectives the name of another cousin who saw the victim and Dillion arguing. The detectives asked him when that was. He said it was 20 to 30 minutes before he showed up. The detectives asked if he knows what led to their argument. He said Dillion was mad because the victim was doing better than him. Detective Barnes asked who owns the house where the victim was shot. The witness said the house belonged to their grandmother. He said everybody stays there when they have nowhere to go. He said there were a couple of people he thinks were there at the time of the shooting, but they don't want to talk to the detectives. He said he will try and make them talk. Lead Detective Jermaine Rogers arrives after speaking with other family members at the hospital. When Rogers looks for Fox in the database, he finds that Fox is 34 years old. The team heads out to look for the cousin who witnessed the argument. 13 hours in, detectives track down the cousin at a store near the crime scene. He was taken into the interrogation room for questioning. Immediately, Detective Jermaine entered the investigation room. He asked him to talk about what he knows about the shooting. He said Little D was running his mouth. He said a few moments later, he heard someone calling his name. Detective Jermaine asked him where Little D was standing when he called his name. He said Little D was standing by the yard. Detective Rogers asked him what they were arguing about. He said they were arguing about a couple of dollars. He said Little D was saying his name like everybody that owes me will pay me what they owe me. He said he was just sitting somewhere. He said he left him and turned to the victim. Detective Jermaine asked what he was saying to Joe. He said he was telling Joe that he was going to kill him. He said he felt like he just doesn't like Joe because Joe did not owe him money. He said while Little D was arguing with Joe, he told him he was going to the 8th Street and he will be back. He said he probably went to get a pistol. The witness said he went to a store to get a soda. Little D had already dipped off before he came back. He said it was when he was coming out of the store that he heard a couple of shots. He said it was like pow. Then he heard pow, pow. He said as soon as he heard the shot, he knew something had happened to Joe. He said he knew he premeditated and did it because that was what he always wanted to do. Detective Germain asked the witness if he witnesses the shooting, and the witness said he did not. Detective Germain asked the witness if there was someone in the apartment before the shooting took place. He said his little brother was there. In the murder of an unidentified woman, detectives hope security camera caught the killer leaving her body in a hospital parking lot. The security camera pens away before the suspect got out. Detective Reggie and other detectives watched the video together to see if they can get the suspect or at least get a lead. Detective Reggie said 2 seconds earlier, they have gotten a tag. Detective Reggie moved to another camera, but he discovered that the camera did not pen. Detectives looked up for the car and discovered that it was either Toyota or Honda Accord. A few hours later, a detective said he went to the autopsy when they were able to clean her body up. He said shots were all around the victim's body. He said it looks like the victim was just from a very close distance. He said the bullet that killed her was the one that hit her jugular. A few moments later, a detective said he has just received an email from the lab guy. The crime lab got a match on the victim's fingerprint. Her name is Marissa Dowies. Maris Dowies is a 49-year-old woman who was born in Tulsa. She leaves behind 3 children. The detective that received the email from the lab guy searched for Marissa Dowies in the database. He got a name of a guy who had domestic issues with the victim. His name is Lil Roach. He got a 2015 report which revealed that Lily Roach came to the door of the victim and even tried to break the victim's window. He pulled her by her hair. He dragged her and began to choke her. The charges were dropped against him because Marissa did not appear in court. Lil Roach's previous convictions include ferocity and drug convictions. After they finished searching, the detectives agree that he is someone they needed to talk to. They also discovered in the course of searching the database that the victim had a son before she died. Detectives found an address for the son's employer. After some few minutes, the detectives headed up to find the son and the guy that had domestic issues with the victim in the past. Their first point of call is the address of the son's employer. The detectives arrived at the address in a few minutes and met the victim's son there. There is no easy way to say this, but your mom has been killed, a detective said to the son of the victim. The detective told him that his mother was shot this morning. The detective asked the young boy if his mother was dating or married to someone. The young boy said his mother is still married to his stepdad, but he knows they've had problems for years. The detectives asked the young boy the name of his stepdad, and he said his name was Eli Roach. The detectives asked the young boy where Eli was living presently. He told them Eli was living in his grandpa's old house. The detectives appreciated the young boy and left after he gave them the address of his grandpa's old house where he claimed Lil was leaving. The detectives immediately moved to the address to see what they could find. When they got there, they found out that it was a lonely place that seems like nobody was staying there. But they found bloodstains on some objects in the building which prompted the officers to approach a court for a search warrant so that they can search the entire building. The detectives returned to the building after they got a search warrant. This time they entered without hesitation. In the living room, detectives found blood, a single 3D showcasing, and a pillowcase that had the same wrapping as the one the victim was wrapped in when she was shot. After some few minutes, a woman approached the detectives and said she used to date Roach. Detective, how long have you been dating Roach? She said she has been dating him for a year. Detective, what kind of car does he have? My car, a white Acura, she replied. The detective pulls up the video of the car seen in the surveillance video and asked her if that was her car. She replied in the affirmative. The detective asked how she would find Roach if she was to find him. He told her to think of some of the places Roach could be at that particular time. She told the detective that she does not know much of Roach's movement. She told them there was no way she could figure out where he would be at that particular moment. Last night on the phone, the family gave detectives an address of where to find the victim's close friend. It was reported that she was the last person that the victim was seen hanging out with. When detectives arrived at the apartment, they knocked and a woman answered. "Detective, I am working on Mary's case and I know she was here the other night." "Yes," she replied. She said it was the night before the last, and she left her apartment about a quarter until 2 a.m. Back to the investigation of Joe Dickerson, detectives identified a possible suspect known as Ernesto Little D, who is Joe's cousin. Now, they need to find an eyewitness who was present at the scene. Joe's cousin, who has been speaking with detectives, told them they would probably get more information from his brother. Detectives asked him where they could find his brother. He said his brother would still be in the yard by the time detectives get back there. He said his brother might be hanging out in the family house while the shooting happened. Detectives left homicide and made their way back to the crime scene to see if they could meet the guy that might probably be there while the shooting happened. As detectives arrived, they found a possible eyewitness and he agreed to talk at homicide. He entered the car with the detectives and they all headed back to homicide. As soon as they arrive at homicide, the witness was taken to an investigation room for question. "You know what we are here for?" a detective asked. "Yeah, for the murder of my cousin," he replied. "I know it's going to be odd to talk about, but Joe needs your help to talk about what happened," the detective told him when he noticed he was still reluctant to talk. He started his speech with the word. Little D did not really like Joe. He said nobody ever figured out why. He said Little D had been drinking that morning, and he was loud all day. He said Little D just started talking out of nowhere and kept talking about how people owed him money. He said a few moments after, Little D started arguing with his brother. He said Little D was ready to fight him. He said his brother was also confronting Little D a little bit. He said Little D calmed down a little bit after he confronted him. He said after that Little D started threatening Joe. He said Little D told Joe that he was going to gun him down if he finds him here when he gets back. He said Little D left and disappeared for a little while, and that was when he got access to a gun. He said he and his uncle was standing in the yard. He said his instincts just told him to stand there. He said he doesn't know why, but out of nowhere, the front door was sprung open, and he saw Little D's arm come out of the house with the pistol. He said that was how Little D shot Joe one time. Back to the murder of Mary, detectives just learned that her estranged husband, Alain Roach, has allegedly threatened to kill her in the past. Detectives are at the home of Mary's friend, whose report showed that she was the last person that hanged out with Mary. Detective, so, in the past when you heard him say, "I'm gonna kill you," did you hear him say that more than once, or you heard him say that one time? A detective asked. "Probably more than once," she replied. Detective, I appreciate you. Take care of yourself. Okay, she replied. As the first 48 winds down, the developing story showed that documents revealed that Mary was shot inside her home, and investigators believed her husband dragged her outside and dropped her body off. An arrest warrant has now been issued out for Alain Roach. In the first 48, Tulsa Homicide responded to the murder of Mary, who was found shot and dumped in a parking lot. Homicide learned that the victim has been allegedly assaulted in the past by her estranged husband, Alain Roach. Homicide detectives headed to their homes to search the apartment. When detectives searched their home, they found bloodstains all over the house and a .380 casing. But they were unable to find Alain Roach. Overnight, patrol officers found the white Acura near the suspect's sister's home. A detective said he spoke with the suspect's sister yesterday. He said his sister told him that he showed up yesterday, and he claimed that he was sleeping outside. She said he was hungry and he needed water. She said she asked him what happened, and he kept saying it was an accident. She said she told him that he needed to turn himself in for questioning so that detectives can do their job. She said he told her that he was never going to turn himself in. She said after some minutes, he took off walking through the Northwest. After searching for Roach for 6 weeks without any luck, the team gets a lead that Roach is hiding in an abandoned trailer in North Tulsa. Detectives immediately made their way to the facility to see if they would find Roach. On getting there, the team detected that there is someone inside the trailer. It is left to see if the person in the trailer is Alain Roach. "Come outside of the door with your hands in the air," a detective said on loudspeaker. After some few minutes, "Time is up. You have to come out now or we are going to deploy paper balls into the trailer," the detective said through the loudspeaker again after they waited and no one came out. After some few seconds, Roach came out and handed himself over to the detectives. The detectives searched the trailer for the 380, but it was nowhere to be found. Detectives made their way back to homicide. Immediately they got to homicide, Roach was taken into the interrogation room for questioning. Detective Reggie and another detective went into the investigation room where Roach was been held. Detective, honestly, we are here because Mary has died. So, tell us what you know about that. I know that she died, Roach replied. The detective asked him how it happened. He kept quiet for some seconds. After that, he said his gun just went off. Back to the murder of Joe Dickerson. Detective Jermaine Rogers has finally found an eyewitness that said Little D pulled the trigger. The witness, while narrating his side of the story, said after the first shot, they heard a couple of more shots. He said Joe was looking towards the street, therefore he didn't see it coming. He said Little D shot Joe for nothing other than for pure jealousy. As the last 5 hours of the first 48 hours slip away, the search for Little D kicks off. In the first 48, mobile homicide was responded to the murder of Joe Dickerson, who was shot in a family member's yard. Joe's little cousin Ernesto Dillion Fox, who is also known as Little D, had threatened to shoot him after an argument in the past. Detectives have interviewed 2 family members. One of the family members interviewed was present at the scene of the incident. Detectives have gotten a warrant for Joe's arrest. After 3 months, with no sign of Little D, he turns himself in. "Man, do you know what we are here to talk about?" a detective asked. "Yes, sir," Ernesto Fox replied. "Do you wish to talk to me right now?" the detective asked him again. "I don't wish to another any questions now," he replied. "I got this lawyer that you can call," the detective told Little D. "All right," Little D replied. Outro. Ernesto Fox was charged with murder, and he is awaiting trial. Criminal charges are often dropped or reduced, and the suspect is presumed innocent until proven guilty by a court of competent jurisdiction. 2 years after Joe's death, family and friends gathered at his graveyard to celebrate his 48 years birthday. They dropped flowers at his gravesite in remembrance of him. Back to Tulsa murder of Mary, Detective Ronnie meets her estranged husband, Ella Roach, to tell him how Mary ended up dead. Detective Ronnie: "How did it happen?" "It just went off," Roach replied. Detective Ronnie: "What type of gun was it?" Roach: "3ED." Detective Ronnie: "How did the gun just go off?" Roach said he kicked the table while he was arguing with the deceased, which made his gun go off. He said he was just a mad dog. He said everybody knows he and Mary argue all the time. Detective Ronnie: "So what happened after the gun went off?" He said firstly he knew she was shot. Then he realized she was not breathing. He said blood started coming out and she was kept on saying something that he couldn't put together. He said when she started losing a lot of blood, he quickly drove her to the hospital. Detective Ronnie: "What happened when you got to the hospital?" He said she was still feeling hurt. He said he went around the other side of the car and he took her out of the car. Detective Ronnie: "Where did you later drop her?" "Parking lot," Roach replied. Detective Ronnie appreciated Ronnie for turning himself in and talking to him, but he finds it difficult to believe that his gun went off because he kicked a table. Outro. Ellie Len Roach was charged with murder, and he is awaiting trial. Criminal charges are often dropped or reduced, and the suspect is presumed innocent until proven guilty.